Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. A little while back I put up a post on my YouTube about looking for people, drum and bass producers who had some half finished tracks and ideas and were looking to finish them up and were struggling a bit with finish the mix or finish the tune. This video is about arrangement, finishing tracks and how to get tunes from that halfway done to over the line. I wanted to say thank you to the artist Pasha Solecci. The idea that they sent over is outstanding. I'll give you a little blast of the original idea. I think it's outstanding, a really amazing piece of music. It's this breakbeat workout tune where different breakbeats come in and out, and it's sort of sample based as well. I feel like there's a couple of synths in there, but what I've seen from the track is, and I want to be clear, this is all love, this is all like constructive criticism. What I noticed that's a problem with it is the progression of the tune is pretty linear. So one, take away some of the linear progression. At the minute it just adds, and I want to have some subtraction. Two, create really interesting loop layers so that it feels like even though you're listening to these loops, they're interesting. And three, create a B section that's really contrasting. I think if I can do those things, be able to get the arrangements looking like really solid. I'm going to use an empty MIDI channel at the top to highlight the structure that we've already got and create a little plan for a structure for the whole tune. Just got little 16-bar MIDI blocks mapped out what I think the tune might do. I can always change this later. I'm keen to keep the ethos of the track just as the artist intended. We'll just get into it. So I'm going to start with the drums, but get them so that it feels like these drums actually develop over the 32 bars here. So one thing I'm noticing with these breaks is that they've got a huge amount of proper low rumble. So I took out some of that with a low shelf just to try and cut some of that. The second thing I noticed is one of the layers of these breaks is think, the classic tams that are at the top. So you really need to have them ready to control. So I'm going to put two little filters just to duck those a couple of dB. Later on they might become a problem. I feel like the drums need a tiny bit of gating and control. So I'm going to gate them to the absolute max and then back off on the wet dry mix. So that's obviously got the break really tight and clean, but also lost all of the groove and vibe as well. So then I use the wet dry just to bring that back a little bit. I think that's a good balance between having enough ambience and atmosphere in the breaks, but also not ruining them. And I'm just going to follow that with a little touch more EQ. I want to be careful because if I adjust this EQ now, before the gate and stuff, it's going to impact all of my settings. So I'm keen not to use that one anymore, but just use this for EQing now. So this EQ is clearly overcooked. I've done way too much EQ. The idea is I'll just pull it into loads of crazy directions of what I might want to hear and then just try backing off on the percentage. I think I'm pretty happy with that. I'll try before and after to make sure I haven't ruined it. I think I've gone too heavy on the gate here and I've lost a little bit of the ambience, so I'll bring that back another couple of percent. Just try that again. I'll just show you really quick what I'm looking for. So if I play you the before now, the breaks are really good. But can you see for the most part they're in the red on this dynameter, and what that means is they don't have a lot of dynamic range at all. It's kind of like a block of drums. There's a balance to be had. So what I'm trying to do with these plugins here is just pull it back so there's a touch of going into the orange and the yellow on this meter, which is getting closer to a little bit more dynamic range. And what I've found is when you have kind of really flat sounds and not enough dynamics, people tend to not want to listen to that over and over and over because you get ear fatigue quite quickly. But the dynamics punching in and out brings stuff back to life. So that's just one thing I'm thinking about and why I'm doing this. But also at the same time, try not to kill the vibe. So I'm just thinking about those things as I process it. So if we check it out now with the after. You can see that the break is majority yellow and moving into the green for dynamics, which is just the right amount of dynamic range. Now I can start layering in the other break beats as interest and excitement into the tune. Because this break is already in this group master drum bus here. So I just want to make a really punchy, clicky, sharp version of it with a bit more punch and click. I can layer in a little bit more dynamics. And I want to have these evolving over time. So what I've done here in Shaperbox is created 4 elements that whenever I need them, I can just ramp these in on the mix wheel to create a little bit of interest in the break, so that each time you hear it over these 4 sections, there's a slightly different effect on it each time, but it'll make it so that it feels like it's kind of moving and a bit exciting rather than just being the same break over and over again. So now I've got all my different things that I can edit here, and I can just have these gently moving over the course of the track so it feels like the break's always changing. so on the break, we have the amount of distortion on the high mids just slowly moving up and down. Then we have a Akai glitchy thing happening different on the bars at the end. For the first section, we have no reverb. Then we have medium amount, and then none, and then a small amount. We've got the little glitch time edits just to get some feels. And then finally, we have lots of hi-hat in this section, and then just a medium hi-hat on this section. This breakbeat changes the whole of the 32 bars. There's little bits of ear candy that keep going on. It's still the same break, and it's only a layer in the main. But if we keep adding these small little gems of ear candy, that's how you can take something that feels just like a loop, but still keeps you hooked the whole time. Let's get this zone break in. Okay, yeah, that's pretty cool for the zone break. And because it just layers in every now and again, it's already got quite a lot of movement. So I'm not going to change much about that. All right, let's get this difference break in. One thing I'm noticing here, where these breaks are kind of mono and then these breaks go really stereo. So I'd like to level that out just a little bit. Yeah, that's all it needed. It was a big stereo low kick, and I think that was making it feel a bit jarring. Maybe this one could have a bit more stereo width. Okay, let's get these next breaks in. One cool plugin, if you're doing like an old school tune like this, is this one called RX950, and it gives it kind of like a classic Akai sound to the breaks. So stuff that was a bit bright and sharp before, you can just kind of cut off some of the bandwidth and filter it just a little bit so that it loses some of that super high, so you can push it a little bit more and get it nice in the mix. I really like that little plugin for that. One thing I'm noticing about these hats is they don't change at all. So what I'm going to do is put some shaper box on there just so that the hat is moving all the time. So we'll just put some patterns in for the hat. So that's only subtle, but you can see that the volume's now changing all the time over 16 bars. Maybe this pitch, I could do it over an odd number of bars, like 3. That could be really interesting. Reverb does something over 8 bars, and maybe I'll have this distortion going over 32. So you can see that each combination of these is going to add something a little bit different and keep the track kind of moving. And even though it's a tiny little hat, these additions of like interest, they add up. And I think that's what can really help develop an idea forward. So that's one thing I'd do. Let's check out how that sounds. So I'm just going to put a little bit of processing on the drum bus group because I've got it dynamic now, the drums, which are really great, but I just want to control some of the changes that happen. So I've got a clipper just for safety. It's not doing anything. It's not clipping at all, but if something did go loud just for a moment, it would just catch that one peak and then not do anything more. So I'm pretty happy with having that on the whole time, but not doing any work, as you can see. So the first compressor, I want to compress the sides of the tune. The mid is coming through on the dry and the sides are only coming through on the wet. So now this can compress the sides a little bit to keep them under control. So this compressor is just working on the sides, and with all those different breakbeats and their differing amounts of mono and stereo information, it's just adding a touch of control to it. It's only a few dB, 3 dB at the most, but I think that's going to add a little bit more coherence to the drums in the stereo, because that was a bit too jarring for me. Once again, it's all about balance, and I might just add something to the overall drum mix to give it a bit of that crunch and grit, because the original had a really gritty drums. If we play that again for a second here. And I don't want to lose some of that grit. I might actually bring a little bit of this gate back as well in the mid-range. And I think a little bit of compression will really help get some of that sound. I'm really happy with how these drums are sounding. I might just want to add a little touch more grit. I'm thinking about maybe the drum bus compressor, this Ableton plugin, just to see if I can get a little something out of it. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. I think we've got some great sounding drums there now that move and develop and have some interest, but are also well balanced. And the drums that I was already sent were excellent. So hopefully I haven't ruined them. I might just let a little bit of the vibes back on this main break master, just to let a tiny touch more of the ambience through. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. And we're sitting in kind of the sweet spot for the dynamics as well. So yellow and a little touch of just saying hello to green. That's where I've found I really like the dynamics for drums, because they're dynamic and they're groovy, but they're not crushed, but they're not quiet. It's kind of like that nice balance. And there's some interest now. We can start bringing in the other elements, just making sure that we've got everything leveled before we start kind of arranging these out and making sure we've got the development that we're looking for, you know? Okay, time to layer in the bass and see how that's going. One of the first things I notice about this bass is it does have some lovely harmonics, and it's kind of supposed to be deep and moody, so maybe I might add the harmonics a different way, because that changes the tone too much. So I'm going to go with the vertigo instead, and just on the second harmonic add some in the low, just in the mono. Oof, that's mean, that bass. The other thing I'm going to do is try and get some dynamics to this bass as well, because at the minute it's just a sort of fat sine, which is lovely, but it's nice to have a little bit of dynamic on the bass. So I'll just show you what I'm thinking about here while I'm doing this. If we look at the bass before these two plugins, so we've got the vertigo and the shaper box, and I just play this bass. you can see that it's just flat. There's no dynamic at all. If I add these plugins in, what's happening is first we give the bass a bit of shape so that the attacks are way higher. It's only mixed in 50% this, but the attacks are now way louder, and so they are going to peak into the saturator a little bit more. So we're going to saturate the attack and add some of this stuff, but then the body is going to come down a bit and not be as pushed into the saturator, so we won't change the overall tone. But hopefully now you can see the bass is sitting in that kind of orange to yellow zone, which is just right for kind of push and crunch. I might even push it a little bit harder, because that's what this tune is supposed to be about, is like that really push sound. There you go. We can even still get it sitting with orange, yellow and red, which is pushed, but not too much. And that's going to be really nice for the dynamics of that bass. We'll try that out overall in the blend, see how that sounds. Now what I'd like to do on the bass, you to actually feel when that sub kicks in, the drums respond to it. So one trick that you can do for that is on the whole drum group, we can put on another shaper box at the end. I'm going to put a volume on there. So this is just the volume going up and down 96 times per second. So it's just creating like a really quick fader up and down. So if you listen to the drums on their own with this, it sounds like the drums are getting all crushed and stuff. The similar sound you get if the drums and the sub bass hit a limiter or clipper at the same time. And so I don't want to have to rely on that. I want to kind of bake it in myself. So what I can do is ramp that effect in each time the bass hits to create the effect that the bass is causing that crunch on the drums, which can be really, really cool. So let's try and get that working. Because obviously the bass is coming up really big there on the drums, I've just added a really small touch of the drive on the top end, so it kind of clips the top end as well as doing that distortion. I'm going to try these the other way around, see how it sounds. Yeah, that's really nice. It feels like those two glue together now. So this drums actually responds to this sub, and because you hear the impact of the sub, it means you don't have to put loads of top end in the sub. So the sub can be low and growly and moody, but then because the drums respond to the sub, you hear it as top end for the sub, kind of in a weird, like a trick way. I don't know. It works for me anyway. We'll see. But yeah, that was the idea. So let's keep going with this final bass. Okay, so I think I got to the point where I'm kind of happy with this loop, and this is pretty cool because it does a different edit here a tiny bit. But one thing I'm noticing is that this bass is pretty similar. There might be tiny differences, but it's not audible enough that I'm noticing if it is. So what I'm going to do is think about, okay, development is the whole aim of the game here, and arrangement. So how do I develop this sound? I do want there to be a second version of this where it can just develop each time. I might just add delay, do something to it, but just evolve it a little bit each time. Okay, so for getting this tune to develop now, what I'm seeing is there is some call and response. So I'm noticing it goes the call here of this Reese and then this sample answers. It's kind of like a call together because it's two subby pitchy basses and then this kind of answers. So there is some call and response here, but then when this calls again, there's no sample to respond here. So that's going to be a little spot around here that I'm going to be able to put a little drive-in sound in just to keep the momentum going. I've got some extra sounds to add and we can just have a look at what's up. So I'm pretty happy with this so far. I think it's sounding all right. I quite like this little bass edit that I've done, but I think it's not enough on its own. So I'm going to add one more sample to that bit to try and make it fit and make something that's a little bit exciting there. I think because the other bass has 2 hits, this one might need to hit twice with bass as well. Okay, I'm noticing this one just has a little bit more sense of space. So I'm just going to add a tiny delay to this, matching the other one a tiny bit, you know. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the progression over this kind of 8 bar. That 4 that Pasha already wrote was wonderful. And then now we've got that little bit of variation with this edit here, just to keep that next section rolling. I think that's a 16 now that works. So we can move on to the next 16 and see how we're going to develop it. One thing I really tried to highlight at the beginning was about subtraction. Sometimes it's really hard once you've got energy rolling to just have the confidence to move stuff down, but be bold with it. So I'm going to try and make this Reese much smaller, really filtered, and do something to make this next 16 feel like a different one from the first one and make it a bit bold. So let's try that out, see what we can get. So you can see we've got the drums responding to the bass there, so it dips out. But then the second time it happens, we might dip the drums in a different way. So like it might just be an edit instead of actually doing the filter this time. So what I think in here in the drum mix that it needs at this point is a little bit of percussion or something with a delay on it to really show you, okay, this section is different from the one before. It has changed and developed. And just noticing now that this sample here has repeated 3 times in a row. And one thing you can look out for when you're trying to develop an idea is 2 repeats is okay, but a 3rd repeat, you want to really change up that sound. So I'm going to make a bit of a deal of developing this one to keep the idea moving forward. See what happens. Let's go. So now this sound, you can see here it's got a big tail and reverb, then it repeats kind of the same twice, and then we've got 2 new edits of that one. So now we should be getting to the point where our 32 feels like it really develops over time. We've got enough edits, we've got little drum fills, we've got this new edit that comes in, got the ride hats that come in just a little bit, and yeah, it feels like the idea is developing. So let's listen to this 16 and see if we've got enough for now, or whether we need just a little bit more to keep it developing. Okay, I've noticed because this one doesn't have a little bit here, we can't have these all repeating the same each time. So it might be nice to have one bass note being high or something. Yeah, just changing the envelope of that one bass is going to make a little bit of just ear candy that goes, oh, that bass has kind of developed a tiny bit. And keeping that up throughout the 16, I think, is really important for making a tune develop, particularly when you're stuck in kind of like a loop. Just these little things to keep the 16 developing is really important for me. Okay, this one little bit doesn't quite do enough for me, and then I think I'll be ready to move it on. So I've got some ambiences here to drop in, and I was thinking about just chopping sections of like weird ambiences out to layer under and like, have them ramp in and stuff. So we'll see how that sounds. Yeah, that was just enough to keep that section developing. Just needed a little bit of something because before we had the edit in that gap. So now we've got this little riser just to keep it developing. Now comes the tricky part of we need to build a B section, and that's really daunting. So the first thing I did was just fully copy over the whole of the A, and I'm just going to make a drastic change to try and start finding what the B section could actually do. So first thing I'm going to do is filter the drums, I reckon.